Golf's third major of the year is coming up this week. It is the U.S. Open at Torrey Pines. Jon Rahm, a decently heavy favorite for this week over at FanDuel Sportsbook. We're going to talk about Rahm. We're going to talk about the favorites, our favorite golfers in each salary tier, and get you set for some PGA DFS at the U.S. Open. Welcome on into the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast, powered by numberFire. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com. Joined here, as always, by Brandon Gdula. He is the managing editor for numberFire.com. Brandon, the U.S. Open is coming up this week at Torrey Pines. Second time heading out there this year. How you doing today?
Good. I got my red, white, and blue on. I got my old U.S. Open shirt from Pebble Beach. Shout out Gary Woodland.
Was that the Ches week?
I think so. I always am envious of analysts who know like who finished top 10. They can run down the top 10 and be like, oh yeah, Ches was Ches. It's like I try, but it goes out of my brain like within 2 days.
I had that issue with baseball because like I had that within the same day, like before the contest locks. Because for baseball, I'm doing research I started doing prep for Tuesday already. Today is Monday. And like by the time I get to the 4 p.m. Q&A today, I'm going to have no idea who's playing today. Mm-hmm. So like it's the same thing where like how am I supposed to remember who did well 2 years ago when I can't remember who I'm supposed to use tonight? Yeah. So I totally get that because like there's just so much dumb stuff going in our minds and it's hard to like keep track sometimes.
Yeah, and I mean I've done NBA betting guides like every day. I'm really tuned into like my models and numberFire's models, and someone asked me this weekend about like who I got for the NBA playoffs, and I'm like, who's even left? Even though I'm breaking this stuff down, and like what are the so yeah, I have that going on, and every time we get a major, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna get a jump start. I'm gonna be doing research, and then just before the show, I was like, did I even prepare for this? Because I'm out of my rhythm. We're doing this early. But I mean, look. Don't worry, because even though I'm worried, we got you covered. We got all the information down. I'm pretty sure of that.
I don't know, man. I feel like we'll probably forget something. Yeah, we'll find something to mess up. Just give it time. We'll figure out what we messed up, but we'll figure it out eventually. There is plenty to discuss today because, as mentioned, they've been to Torrey Pines South already once this year. The Farmers, of course, 3 out of 4 rounds are at Torrey Pines South. They'll be there once again this week. We're going to break things down from a DFS perspective in just 1 second. But first, do not forget, if you want to quiz Brandon on everything PGA betting and DFS, you have the chance to do so every Tuesday at 3:30 p.m. Eastern, the FanDuel YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter pages. Brandon is live with you for half an hour, taking your questions on air this week. Talk some betting. If you have some leans on people you want to get Brandon's thoughts on, or you want to talk more DFS, tune in 3:30 p.m. Eastern Tuesday, YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter, and ask Brandon about that there. And of course, we're live with the MLB DFS Q&A every weekday at 4 p.m. Make sure you are subscribed there on the FanDuel YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter pages. Also, make sure to subscribe to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. MLB every weekday, PGA every week, UFC via Austin Swaim. Got a NASCAR podcast for Nashville, their first race there, coming up on Friday as well. So a lot of good stuff here on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. Make sure you are subscribed on your platform of choice. Let's break down now the U.S. Open again at Torrey Pines South. It is 7,652 yards and a par 71. This hosted the U.S. Open back in 2008. Tiger won then. Of course, no Tiger this week. It's hosted the Farmers Insurance Open as well, though, again, that does include a round on the North Course. You go to Fantasy National, you can filter by course, so you can effectively take out what is there for the North Course there. Just filter by the South Course and find who has done well there. There are 156 golfers in the field. It is a unique cut for this week because only the top 60 plus ties make it after the first 2 rounds. So, already tough to identify cut makers. It is getting tougher. Sweet. Love to hear it. Brandon, I want to hear your thoughts, though. We have good data on Torrey Pines and specifically the South Course. What stands out to you when you dig into that data?
Well, anytime you look at a U.S. Open and any major, I look at an all-around game. There are some courses where it's like driving distance and putting and, solid irons will be enough. Sometimes very rarely, you got to have a great short game with the wedges and the putter. But at a US Open, at really any major, it's like I want guys who can gain distance off the tee because it's the easiest way to gain strokes. They got to have good irons. They're going to have to get up and down to have good wedges. They're going to have to make putts. So I know it always feels like a little bit of a cop-out, but I want all four of those aspects. They're weighted differently for me, with the most emphasis on approach. For me this week, it's going to be driving distance, but kind of the number one thing for me is all-around good golfers. It's not going to be a birdie fest. So I want to limit the red flags that a golfer has. If you struggle in two of those four areas, it's going to be hard for me to talk myself into playing that golfer because we have so many other options. It's alternatives, and that's just what we're dealing with for this week. But Torrey Pines South requires distance, kind of unlike any other course on the regular PGA Tour rotation. So for me, distance is a bit of a must. If you're not long off the tee, you have to be stellar at everything else. There's a few golfers who we'll talk about specifically. You mentioned Jordan Spieth before the show. I'm sure we'll talk about him plenty, but I want distance. And if you don't have distance, you have to be pretty much flawless elsewhere. Iron play is always something that you have to put at the top of the list because you can just gain the most strokes from iron play, from your approach play. So for me, that's a must. And I did look back at the 2008 U.S. Open. They had an event in January at Torrey Pines, and then the U.S. Open. And I just wanted to get somewhat of an idea. Basically, golfers who missed the cut could bounce back pretty easily and fare well at the U.S. Open. So I'm not worried about guys who missed the cut here. But golfers who actually finished well in January played pretty well in the U.S. Open. So it could be a confidence thing, could be a fit thing. I know the setup is going to be different. It's going to be a lot more difficult. Rough's going to be thicker, but I don't think you just throw out everything we saw in January just because they played one round at Torrey Pines North. So for me, my key stats, strokes gain approach, driving distance, strokes gained putting on POA, bogey avoidance, and strokes gained around the green.
So what you're saying with regards to the farmers is don't cross off guys who struggle, but also maybe still give a bump up to guys who did well effectively?
That's what we saw in 2008. It kind of makes sense. And also that's just a piece of the puzzle. You don't want to just sort by the leaderboard and play those guys, not looking at form, not looking at course fit, anything like that. So for me, it's a big plus to see a good finish. It's not a bad thing to see a missed cut or that somebody didn't play here in January. These are the best golfers in the world this week. So that's just kind of how I'm perceiving the January event entering this week.
And I think the bump up the guys who did well aspect is smart because a lot of our issues with course history come from the fact that they're there just once per year. This is one of the rare instances where we actually have data from less than half a year ago. Yeah. So it's not the be all end all, but it helps. And I think that I would say it helps a lot more than it would for a usual event. So we're on the same page there. I agree. Distance does matter a lot there. There are exceptions, but the rule is you should be long. You should be gaining distance off the tee. We'll talk about Jordan Spieth, who maybe not a guy who gains there, but he's not dragging it down and does well elsewhere. So we'll talk about the exceptions, talk about who fits our process and who has done well at Torrey Pines South specifically in just 1 second. But first, it is always exciting when a player scores a goal in the Euros, but this year it's twice as exciting because FanDuel is paying out double the winnings when you bet on a player to score during a Euro 2020 game. Just sign up at FanDuel Sportsbook and pick your goal scorer for a shot at 2 times the payout. Choking on my own spit. This happened on Wednesday last week too. I've choked my own spit twice in the past week. I'm washed. But just sign up. Okay, where was I? Okay, in a tournament. Can't read either. In a tournament featuring some of the best goal scorers in the world, guys I've definitely heard of, like Harry Kane. I think I've played him in DFS before. Cristiano Ronaldo, you'll have plenty of options to choose from, but no matter who you pick, FanDuel will double your payout up to $250, and you'll have your bonus in less than 72 hours. There's no better place to bet Euro 2020 than FanDuel Sportsbook. Must be 21 plus and present in Colorado, Iowa, Indiana, Michigan, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Virginia, or West Virginia. New users only. First real money wager only. $10 first deposit required. Bonus issued as a non-withdrawable site credit that expires in 7 days. Max bonus $250. Restrictions apply. See full terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In Colorado, 1-800-522-4700. In Iowa, 1-800-BETS-OFF. In Indiana, 1-800-9-WITH-IT. For confidential help in Michigan, 1-800-270-7117. In Tennessee, call the red line, 1-800-889-9789, or visit 1-800-GAMBLER.net in West Virginia. I want to do like a trivia category. That's like you guess the gambling addiction numbers for each state. I think I could do pretty well there. So we'll work on that.
If you ask me which state belongs to the Tennessee red line, I think I could get that one.
I could get Colorado's because I had to do like some commercial reads for them at one point. It was the only one I had to do, and I had to listen to myself say it over and over and over again, and it just drove me nuts. Great utility to have, but like I don't like listening to my voice that much. I do, but it's not over and over. Anyway, let's talk about golfers who have done well at Torrey Pines South, specifically in the past. We're going to try to zero in on the 3 rounds there via the Farmers and other stuff, and makes sense that Patrick Reed would be a guy worth discussing here. We're talking about bumping guys up who did well here back in the winter. Patrick Reed obviously did that. He is 10-7. What do you see with Patrick Reed for this week?
Yes, I mean, if you want to talk driving distance, you don't really get Patrick Reed there, but he has overcome that to do well at Torrey Pines South in his career. Won the Farmers in January when he gained 1.8 strokes from ball striking across 3 measured rounds and 8.4 strokes from a short game, which is a lot. That is a 99th percentile short game performance in my database since the start of 2020 over 3 rounds. He has 10 performances ranking in the 95th percentile when you combine his around the green and putting since the start of 2020, which is just wild. It's up there with some of the best, which is not surprising because he's so good with the wedges and such a good putter. But he's overcome that lack of distance to do well at the Farmers in the past, finishing 1st, 6th, 13th, 23rd, and 39th. So actually improving each of those times. So
can he improve from 1?
I think he can improve on a Farmers win with the U.S. Open win.
So, is that actually better? Do people care more about the U.S. Open than the Farmers?
Who could say? We'll have to do some Google Analytics and see who's what gets more buzz. But
check the search traffic, yeah.
In total, he ranks 1st among all golfers in this field in strokes gained at Torrey Pines South among golfers with at least 10 rounds since 2012, according to Fantasy National. Reed is someone I struggle with because I have a win simulation model that's based on data. It's basically Reed, Spieth, and Brooks Koepka who just give me nightmares, and to some degree Bryson because his irons aren't that good. But at a certain point, I overlook that with Reed because I know that there are going to be courses that fit him better than others. He gets around Torrey Pines South well, has 4 top 15s at U.S. Opens over the past 6 years. That's not specifically what we're looking at. We're looking at, Torrey Pines history, but I do think U.S. Opens generally try to be set up similarly. So I'm not talking myself out of Reed. He's one of my favorite plays in the 10,000 range, not just because of the win, but because he can handle tough conditions. So what are your thoughts on Patrick Reed this week?
Yeah, I think it depends on how much buzz he gets as a result of that win, because if he gets buzz, he's a pretty easy avoid because there's so many good alternatives, which is something we discuss a lot, where I'm more willing to fade the chalk if I have good alternatives, and I very much do here. The counterpoint to that is, well, no one's going to be that popular because there's so many good options. So, is he going to be restrictively popular? No, I don't think so. But, is he going to be more popular than Tony Finau? If yes, then I would rather just go Finau because I think I prefer Finau straight up. Do you want to do a bet? You're cringing. Do you want to do a bet?
No. I'm saying I don't know because it's one of the most.
Do it.
No, it's one of the most agreeable, likable golfers versus
everyone loves Patrick Reed. What
Patrick
do you mean?
Reed. So
no one's ever had an issue with Patrick Reed, especially not like his teammates in college or anything. No.
But just speaking to that point, because I have this pulled up, because I think this also frames a lot of what we're looking at this week. You always want to fade the chalk in a major when we have alternatives, but just over the past 3 majors, for some context, at the PGA, nobody was on more than 30% of FanDuel lineups. Only 4 golfers were on at least 25%. Usually we see golfers at at 35, sometimes 40%, depending on the tournament. At the Masters, which is a smaller field, Justin Thomas, Jordan Spieth were the only golfers above 25%. They were both above 30%. And then at the US Open last year, 3 golfers above 30%, just 1 above 33%. That was Jon Rahm. So we're not looking at like multiple golfers close to 40%. It's going to be pretty flat. So yes, you want popularity still to dictate some of your decisions, especially if you're playing big tournaments, but it's not going to be quite the same as it can be in weaker fields. So that's going to drive a lot of my decision making this week. And
especially too, because again, that's going to be a pretty loaded tier. So I would expect things to be pretty even, but I think to me personally, I probably prefer Finau straight up. And if there's a possibility that Reed gets buzz as a result of the win, I'm okay. I think that Reed is a very defensible play, and other guys in that range, he might grade out better than a lot of them, but I'd rather just get more Finau, I guess, is probably the way that'll settle out for me. We'll talk about Tony Finau later on as well. But first, let's talk about Xander Schaffler, your boy, Brandon, who, if you look at the overall form at Torrey Pines, it's not great because he missed a lot of cuts. He's missed 4 cuts in 6 tries at the Farmers. So the overall form is not good. But I think that what he did here back in, is it January or February? What are we saying here? Because it started in January.
I say January.
Okay.
Wherever it started is usually what I lean.
I think it was the 31st of January.
I think so, yeah.
Whatever. Anyway, when he was here...
Speaking of not remembering things.
He might not even played the South Course in January, which is why I asked. Because he might have played the North Course on Thursday. I don't know. Whatever. When they were here earlier this year, Xander was outlier-ishly good. He actually led the field, tied for the lead with Victor Hovland for the most strokes gained on the South Course. He gained 11.2 total strokes in that time, tied with Hovland for the most. And a lot of that came from putting, but not a huge surprise there because Xander is a very good POA putter. Ranked 16th there among golfers in the field. He missed the cut of the PGA, bounced back with an 11th at the Memorial. That is despite losing 1.9 around the green. So overall, the history at Torrey Pines is bad. However, we were talking about valuing what people did earlier this year. Xander was amazing on the South Course specifically. So he's by Brooks, Rory, Colin Morikawa. How do you feel about Xander this week, given how good he was the first trip here this year?
If I love Xander, I would use probably an expletive for how much I like Xander this week. I think that this could be the week for him.
Okay.
Grew up playing Torrey Pines because he's from San Diego. Played it a lot in high school, so it's really kind of surprising to see him struggle here on the PGA Tour. But one thing that also probably won't get a lot of buzz, maybe it will, but Xander never seems to get much. He's very popular, but he doesn't seem to get a whole lot of media attention. He's changing his putting grip to a wrist lock putting grip, which he's already, I think, 10th on or top 10 on the PGA Tour this year in strokes gained putting. But he's called it a distinct advantage, and that basically thinks that arm lock putting should be outlawed, but because it's not, he's going to use it. So you take everything Xander does well, which is everything, and make him an even better, more consistent putter. I don't know how you make a case for. Look, I get if you're hesitant to bet him to win outright because of his history, but if you're talking FanDuel and high floors and US Opens and majors and consistent putting and just doing everything well, I just never see how Xander's not a priority play from a process standpoint. So for me, That's what he is. He's one of my favorite plays. I'm going to bet him. And I love Xander, and it's not just because I'm biased. It's because of virtually everything pointing to Xander being a safe play, whereas other golfers might not be.
And I think the other thing, too, is we're talking about how he might not win. But, like, a lot of times I think when that discussion happens of whether people can close things out, we don't view things in terms of actual probabilities. It's viewed in absolutes. Like, if Xander may not have the ceiling to win as much as other guys, people assume his win odds are 0. That's not true. Like, that's just blatantly false. His win odds are not 0. His win odds are greater than 0. You have numbers that can bear that out. He actually has won on the PGA Tour not that long ago. So I think that narrative is a bit overplayed, especially because, again, like you said in DFS, you need a winner. It doesn't need to be him. And we'll have other cracks at guys who could win. And also, I think the other thing with Xander that I like a lot this week is the salary, because he is 11-4, and that leads, if he is your number one golfer, that leads to a pretty balanced lineup. And I love, again, it's just Tony Finau basically, but like Finau, Reed, Daniel Berger, they're all in the 10,000 range. I think they're all really interesting plays for this week. I'd like to be there often, and using a guy like Xander paired with one of them is going to get me a really balanced lineup where I can get some guys who are solid, like Paul Casey in the high 9,000 range. So to me, I feel like he fits what I want, not only like from a roster construction perspective, but also like statistically, stylistically, everything else. So I know that you're the Xander guy. So people may be wary of you saying it, but I'm saying it too. I think that he's a really good play this week.
I mean, like, look, I would just ask anyone to say, like, point to something with Xander and be like, here's why he's a bad process-based play. And I think the only thing you can say is that he hasn't closed a win in a while, and that's it.
Yeah.
And that's not enough for me, because that's not
I would say the only other
his
thing
fault.
is salary relative to Dustin Johnson specifically. I think DJ's a tremendous play. He's $300 more. That's the one thing I would put out there as being a slight. It's not enough to make me say no Xander. It's enough to make me say in some lineups I will find the 300 to get to DJ.
That's less to do with Xander and more to do about
Correct.
The surrounding elements.
Exactly. So we both like Xander again this week, in part because of what he did at Torrey Pines South earlier this year. Let's move down to the low 9,000 range. A couple of guys who are the exact same salary. You'll talk Mark Leishman. Then I'm going to talk Adam Scott. Then we'll talk about both of them overall, who we prefer, et cetera, et cetera. What are you seeing with Leishman first?
Yeah, I mean, Leishman's been trending back up for a bit, and I haven't jumped on board, but he won the Farmers in 2020, gained 4.7 strokes from approach, 8 on the greens. He's typically putted pretty well at Torrey Pines South, gaining 6.1, 3.3, 0.4, 8, and 4.4 strokes at the Farmers the past 5 years. Again, those are just 3 rounds on with ShotLink data there, but in total, ranks 4th in strokes gained average at Torrey Pines South since 2012 among this field. One problem is that he's not been particularly good at U.S. Open setups. And again, you have to balance, he's done well at Torrey Pines South, but not necessarily U.S. Open setups, which are kind of their own specific thing of, really long rough, things like that. Trying to play it kind of to par is always sort of the intention, even though the USGA doesn't specifically say that's their intention sometimes. But he has an 18th place finish at a U.S. Open, but was outside the top 25 in 8 other starts, missed 4 of 9 cuts. That's, again, worrisome. But he's been playing good golf lately for the most part. I'm still not totally sold on him. It's surprising, or it's nice that you brought up Adam Scott, who I prefer. So talk to me about Scott, and we'll see what we want to do down here in this range.
Yeah, I think that Scott, although Leishman's the winner at the Farmers, Scott seems like a better course fit based on distance. And, the form is kind of funky right now for Scott. He's had some erratic off the tee play, but he's played well in his 2 trips to Torrey Pines. He played the Farmers in 2019 and 2021, and Scott finished top 10 in both. In that 3-year stretch, he gained an average of 3 strokes per round on Torrey Pines South. That is the most among all golfers in that 3-year sample. Patrick Reed second at 2.8, so 0.2 strokes between Scott and the field. He did a lot of that on the greens, but POA is easily the best surface for Adam Scott. if we look since the Farmers this year, the form has been weird. He's made all but one cut, but he has lost an approach in 3 out of 6 measured events. So Scott is $9,300. That's a pretty low salary. It seems like it's for good reason given the form being kind of shaky, but good sample at Torrey Pines and a small sample. His data is still good despite the blips recently. So what's your thought here on Adam Scott at $9,300?
I was 26th at the 2008 U.S. Open, which I think still very, very relevant. I mean, I say that jokingly, but Adam Scott's really good. He doesn't play a lot of golf necessarily, like competitively. It's always hard to figure out what his current form is, but he just kind of shows up and plays Adam Scott golf, which is generally really good. Not accurate. He's in the 14th percentile in fairways gained over the past 100 rounds, according to Fantasy National, but is long. 86th percentile there. So, for me, I'm good with Scott. He's got, he's on POA, which is very promising for him. So I much prefer him at that same salary over his country mate. I don't know what word I'm looking for
mate?
There, but
was the mate intentional?
No,
okay.
It wasn't, but
okay.
I guess it was. Yeah.
Just playing the stereotypes, Brandon. Yeah, I think that Scott works out well. I do like that tier an okay amount because there are some like good golfers there, like Kokrak's there.
I'm with you, but I knew he was number one as you were going to list.
I mean, Sam Burns is there too.
Love Sam Burns this week.
Sam Burns has a pretty big red flag, but outside of that, he can do some stuff. He can do some damage. Kokrak is there. Burns is there. It's decently close to like Joaquin Neiman has issues too, but like everyone does. So I think that it's a good range, but I would say that Scott is, to me, the way I'd phrase it is in consideration, despite it being good tier. Do you agree with that phrasing?
Yeah. Scott's one of my favorite plays down there.
Okay.
I'm going to be pretty heavy on this range because I don't want to dig too far down.
Right.
Where
a lot of times we'll get into the low 9,000 range because like we're trying to jam in more guys at the top. But I think for me, potentially based on the way you're sounding too, it's in order to avoid the tier below it. I think that we're on the same page there.
Yeah, that's where you see the win equity really, really fall off. And when you want to talk about golfers who can't win, if you look back at some odds, like long shots don't really win the U.S. Open, which is not surprising. But if you roster 2 extreme value plays, you're really saying like one of my 4 other golfers who I'm spending up for to roster, they're going to win. And like, yes, that can definitely work if the value play is, top 15 or whatever. But, even like there's still a correlation between win equity and like the odds that someone's top 10 or top 15 or something like that. So I really want to minimize the exposure I have to golfers in the, I'll say, low 8,000 and below range, because the upper 8,000 range is pretty solid.
Correct. And right at 9,000 too, there's some guys who I like. So yes, I'd agree with that as well. Very much I think that the word balance is what I'll say, but it's more so avoid the punts is the true philosophy for me. Like I want to make sure I'm avoiding below like 88 or so is where I would like to kind of keep the floor of my roster. Let's move now to current form. Look at golfers who are golfing well right now. And one guy who has not been golfing recently is Jon Rahm. As a result of that positive COVID-19 test at the Memorial, he has been cleared to play. So we can talk about him in definitives here. He's already been cleared. He'll be good to go for this week. Rahm obviously was lighting the world on fire at Muirfield before that positive test. Now comes back and with that quick turnaround, it implies to me that he was asymptomatic, which bodes well because we can see a fall off a lot of times for guys who did have symptoms. Rahm probably not going to fall in that category. So he is 12-2. He is the heavy favorite. How are you viewing Jon Rahm for this week?
Yeah, I think Rahm's really, really interesting because, I can't recommend to bet him at 9.5 to 1 with everyone else at much better odds. But when you talk FanDuel, it's completely different because his salary is 12-2. You have Jordan Spieth at 12,000. Like, not that those are your only 2 options, but DJ's 11.7, like you already mentioned. So it's a lot different between betting Rahm and just finding a few hundred more to get to Rahm, which, I'm not saying you can always find a few hundred more. It's not the case, but it's not like proportional between the two. So his current form's super interesting. For reasons you already mentioned, but he was on his way he had a 6-shot lead after 54 holes, and then he had to withdraw. His recent stats have him ranking second in the field in Data Golf's true strokes gain metric over the past 20 rounds, trailing only Colin Morikawa. He has a really strong track record at Torrey Pines as well, including a win at the Farmers, 4 total top 7s in 5 starts. He's always good off the tee when he plays at Torrey Pines. The irons have been a little bit, up and down, but he's on POA, which is a really good surface for him. Like, again, I can't really point to a process-based reason not to like Jon Rahm on FanDuel with the salary being so close to everyone else. Betting is completely different, so I'm not going to bet Jon Rahm, but I mean, if you want to anchor your lineup with a superstar, I think Rahm makes a lot of sense, even after the COVID test.
This is the positive of playing DFS and betting, is you have 2 routes to getting financial exposure to someone. Like, I talk about that a lot with like guys in NASCAR. Kind of Kyle Larson, but you could justify betting him a lot of the times too at his super short odds. But with Rahm, I think that this is the optimal way to get financial exposure to him. I would say though that I think if we're gonna see someone become crazy popular, I think that the buzz around Rahm as a result of that very viral moment at Muirfield is likely going to lead to I think I'm setting the over under for roster rate on him at 33%, which doesn't seem like a lot, but it's probably going to be I would guess, make him the most popular golfer by a decent amount, I bet. So I think that when you add in that with the salary gap, you have a reason to not go with Rahm. But I would say if you do that, I would not go full fade. I think that he is good enough and his salary is affordable enough where if you're going to do it, go underweight as opposed to full fade. I'm not sure where I'll settle on that as of right now, but I think that that's kind of the one negative with Jon Rahm is because the odds are so ridiculously short and because he will get buzz as a result of that viral moment. I think he's probably the betting favorite to be the most popular golfer in the field as well.
Yeah, and historically we see the betting favorite and the highest salary golfer be the most popular. It's a matter of, is he 35% or is he 27%? Where does that kind of shake out? I'm kind of cool with it either way because there are so many ways to vary your lineups. Mm-hmm. And yes, if Jon Rahm is on 35% of lineups and happens to miss the cut, you're going to get a huge leg up by doing a full fade. I don't think you have to do that. There are so many combinations of golfers in majors that you can use to differentiate. So I'm not out on Jon Rahm, even though I do expect him to be around 30%. Like you said 33, I'd say 30. But I think, again, just process-wise, just makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, I mean, outside of the popularity, there's no reason not to like Rahm. The salary's fine, other stuff. So that's the one negative with him, potentially. Let's talk about Shane Lowry. We've talked about Lowry a couple times, I believe, in the current form section over the past 2 months or so. And we've been trying to decide whether the form is legit. He is $9,600, and he just keeps on doing it, which is nice. Lowry has 4 top 10 finishes in the past 7 events. One of those was the PGA Championship. Another was the Players. So he's doing it against tough fields, which we obviously have here as well. And Lowry is doing it via the ball striking for the most part because at the PGA, he gained 6.3 off the tee. He has gained at least 1.3 on approach in 6 straight measured events, including 3 in which he gained 3+ on approach. He does have a top 10 at the Farmers back in 2015. Lowry has gained an average of 1.3 strokes per round on the South course. So he's $9,600. That's a good tier, as we alluded to before. Are you in on Shane Lowry this week?
Probably not, just because I can only play so many golfers in that range. And I have enough concerns just generally with his putting being what it is. He's fine on POA, but historically long-term, not particularly great with the putter. Just good everywhere else. Long enough, 69th percentile driving distance, which is very nice to see, but doesn't really stand out for me compared to other golfers. And I do think that, when you go through here, where's a good place to start? Cam Smith, 9,800. So we're going to go 9,800 and just go down by salary. Here's the win odds for these guys. Cam Smith, 60. Tommy Fleetwood, 75. Matt Fitzpatrick, 65. Sungjae Im, 80. Joaquin Niemann, 70. Shane Lowry, 37. Abraham Answer 70, Corey Connor 75. So he's the one who stands out there. I think he'll probably kind of shake his way toward the top, and be a little more popular than I want to be in on him. So I think I'm probably just out for that reason.
Yeah, I don't know if I'll be out, but like I'm okay. He's not going to be my favorite guy in that tier. I think there are other ones who I like. Like we'll talk about Kokrak. I know it's like a joke, but it's true. Neiman's interesting as well. So I think that I'm less out on Lowry than you are. I think I'm pretty receptive to it, but like he won't be a priority for me. I'll still use him, I'm pretty sure, if I had to guess right now, but not a huge, massive priority from my perspective.
You want to give me a head-to-head?
On?
Cam Smith?
No, not really. I think Smith's a pretty good option too. So I have no conviction
like Kokrak
on that
too.
one.
So I mean, I'm not going to bait you, but
no.
Okay.
I do like Phil if you wanted Phil.
Wait, you want to give me Phil or you like?
Yeah, you
Phil?
can have Phil. You accept? Do you accept the terms of my offer?
I don't think.
Okay. Well, I tried.
No.
Can't say I didn't try. So I said before that I think Rahm will be the most popular golfer in the field. One guy who might give him a run for his money is a guy who gave the entire world a run for their money last week. That's Garrick Higo, $8,600, obviously coming off a big win. The salaries were released before last week's event, and now he looks like a massive value. So what do you see with Higo based on the couple events we have of data on the PGA side, but also based on what he's done overseas?
Yeah, I talked about Higo a good bit on the podcast. I think even again on the Q&A last week. I was out on him because his salary.
I thought you were bragging there. So no, he's dragging himself.
No, I would never brag. I would always
you're allowed to brag. You're allowed to brag. And I was like, okay, cool. I like this. This is a good side of Brandon. And they're like, oh no, he's actually dumping on himself. Cool.
He was 10-2 and like if you look at his data, it's super reliant on the putter. According to Data Golf's, true strokes gained, just really using the putter to get his wins. He's super long off the tee. He's averaging over 310 yards on the European Tour. So, you think maybe the irons aren't quite there just yet, and I want to choose someone who's getting wins with a hot putter and is, above 10-2. But it's very different now at 8,600 after a win. The win was well-deserved, but Jessen just, look, Higo played really, really good golf, but he ranked 15th in strokes gained putting last week, but also 13th off the tee, 11th in approach. It was a weak field overall, but that's still promising to see. He's 17th in the European Tour in driving distance this season. Again, over 310 yards, which you like to see there. Especially for Torrey Pines. The real issue is that popularity, trying to figure things out. He was under 9% last week. At the PGA Championship, he was 1% on FanDuel. That's obviously going to go up. The question is it 15, 20%? Is it 30, 35%? I don't know. I'm going to have to kind of take a wait and see approach. I still think he's a good process play, and I'm not just turning myself around after a win. I'm turning myself around because I saw he's still young, saw really good ball striking from him. And honestly, this is why I don't like to base my assumptions and observations off of what I see, but his putting stroke looked so good. He was just putting everything to like 2 feet. I feel really confident in
Film
that.
grinder Brandon? Are we seeing a new thing here?
He's got that lefty swing. I don't know. I'm just in on Higo, but I think he's a good process play no matter what.
So my question is, are you okay enough with Higo to forsake what we talked about before, where you're okay like having a lower salary golfer? Because like for me, if the option is Higo versus other guys at his salary are lower, I'm taking Higo. But the discussion isn't that. The discussion is, would I rather just stay a little bit higher? I think I would. So relative to his tier, I think he's great. But like if I can get up to Charlie Hoffman, I don't know if that's like the best, but like I'd rather go Charlie Hoffman and just like keep that as like my salary floor versus going with Higo. Max Homa is at $9,000 too. I think he's pretty interesting. That's kind of where I'm at. So it's not anything with Higo specifically. I just think I'd rather keep my salary floor a little bit higher and bathe in those guys. Part of the reason, though, we're trying to keep the salary floor higher is because the guys down there don't have win equity, and apparently Higo does now. So I think that does change the discussion, but my preference is to be a little bit higher. So what are your thoughts on him from a roster construction perspective?
So, I mean, at 86, he's not completely, down in he's not 76, he's 86.
Yeah.
I'm cool with Higo, cool with Lonto Griffin as well to some degree. He's 8,000, but I'll have one golfer down there in a lot of lineups. Frankly, Higo probably undersalaried at this point.
Yes.
So I'm not going to hold that against him for being at that salary. I just want to make sure I'm not playing the chalkiest lineup when I play Higo. It's going to be oh yeah, play Higo so you can play John Rahm. It's going to be a very popular combination. You might get 2 of the 3 most popular plays of the week on the same lineup, and you can still differentiate from there, especially if you get someone under 5%. But at that point, it comes into the combinations. So I'm good with Higo. I'm going to keep my exposure a little bit low because I still have some concerns with the tee to green. But overall, I'm not going to jump off of Higo because I don't anticipate that all of a sudden Garrett Higo is going to be 35%. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong.
Right. I would bet you're probably right, not 35. And probably not high enough to be worth it for winning either. I think for me, it's just if there are any concerns with the ball striking, I'd be okay just dipping a little bit higher in the salary pool to get there for guys who I know will be good ball strikers, even if they might not be as good in some other departments. Speaking of which, let's talk Jason Kokrak. Not as good in the short game. Jason Kokrak's here. He has the distance. He's got the approach play to do well. The question, as always with Jason Kokrak, is can he not suck with the short game? And he has been showing improvements there recently. Specifically, the putting has been better. Kokrak has gained on the greens in 6 of the past 7 measured events. He has not lost more than 2 strokes putting since August of last year. So he's avoiding implosions, but also gaining on a pretty consistent basis. POA is his worst surface, which is worth noting. But when you're making improvements, it's tougher to trust the splits versus the overall thing, especially because the last POA event was, I don't remember, honestly. It's been a while. And it might actually be the Farmers. And Kokrak was there. We have a recent example of him on POA. That was at the South Course. In the 3 rounds at the South Course, Kokrak lost 0.2 strokes putting. So he wasn't bad. He gained 6.2 total strokes in those rounds. That ranked 12th among golfers who were in that field, who are also in this field. The around the green play has continued to be rough, and that's a concern this week because, like you said, we want good all-around golfers, and around the green play does matter. So Kokrak will strike the ball well. He might be improving at the putter. Is that enough to keep you on board here at $9,400, or do the lingering concerns with the short game keep you from buying in?
I like Kokrak. Just to fill in, the most recent POA event was the Genesis at Riviera. He was 32nd there. Didn't play at AT&T at Pebble Beach, and then the Farmers, so 29. So basically, gained 8.2 strokes putting at Riviera, which is nice to see. For me, it's just generally the ball striking and the overall form for Kokrak being quite good. He's not great at majors overall, which is kind of on brand for him.
My bankroll.
Yeah, kind of on brand for him. But he is still a standout play below 9,500. Might be my favorite play, but I might go with Adam Scott or Sam Burns over Kokrak below 9,500, but he's still in that conversation. So just like Jason Kokrak's all in on himself with the pocket aces, pocket kings, pocket queens, I'm kind of all in on Jason Kokrak this week.
Yep. We had to fit that one in there at some point. I would agree he's probably my favorite guy below 95. And I would say it's the same consideration set down there too. So I think we're on the same page with that range. It's a good range. Good overall golfers down there, which is encouraging, but Kokrak is the goodest of them. Let's talk about the odds for this week. As mentioned, Jon Rahm, the heavy favorite despite the stack field. He's plus 950 at FanDuel Sportsbook, which is ridiculous. I mean, makes sense, but it's ridiculous. Then you have a cluster after him. It's Dustin Johnson at 15-1, Bryson DeChambeau at 16. Then there are three guys who are all 18-1. Those are Brooks Koepka, Rory McIlroy, and Xander Schaffler. Colin Morikawa is 19-1. Jordan Spieth is 21-1, followed by Justin Thomas at 23-1. Patrick Cantlay, Tony Finau, and Victor Hovland are 24-1. And then Patrick Reed rounds of the top group here at 28-1. So from an odds perspective this week, Brandon, it is Rahm and then flat. Very, very flat after Jon Rahm. What does that do for you from a roster construction perspective?
It makes me want to play Rahm on FanDuel, as I already talked about. Not a good betting value for me. So those are very different things. But like once you factor in, I think Rahm is a really good option at the top of the field. But that also means if you don't play Jon Rahm, you still have a lot of other options, and you can kind of jump down salary tiers to someone like Xander or, I'm not looking specifically at the betting market. I'm looking more at like my win simulations. But like you can find clusters of good win odds now at the bottom of those salary tiers. Someone like Tony Finau, for example, who I know you love, but you can still just gloss over Jon Rahm, who is overvalued from a betting standpoint. From like, he shouldn't be 9.5-1 is what I'm saying. So like, he's probably the favorite to win. My model has him barely over Xander as the favorite to win. Those two guys typically when they're in the field are 1-2 respectively, but it's not enough to feel like you must play Jon Rahm. It's still like, even if you give him, I should have had this pulled up, but what's 9.5-1? I can't do this in my head. So
it's like
plus
9.7%,
9.5. Okay. 9.52%. So, yeah, that's probably too high. I have him at 5.8%. So very, very easily less likely to win than he is to win. So I'm cool avoiding Rahm. But again, process-wise, I think Rahm makes a lot of sense. So to answer your question, finally, I think you take like the savings by getting those flat odds. And going to kind of the bottom of those tiers where those cutoffs are for savings like that.
100% agree. I think that Rahm plus balance is enticing. If you go Rahm Finau, that's 9,300 left per golfer. That works because if I get like a Higo in there, I'm living in a range that I like a lot. So I think that taking advantage of the tiers means probably getting Finau, Berger, Reed, one of those guys as being your second golfer, whether you're going with Rahm as your top guy or a Xander, even DJ I'd put in that discussion as your top guy. You're getting into the good tiers and you can avoid the true value plays, the true scary options down there. And I think that's the way I want to play things for this week. So to me, the takeaway from the flat odds is that it really increases the appeal of the mid to high 10,000 range. And it makes them pretty enticing to me. So that's kind of my big takeaway from there is I want to be in that high 10,000 range, decent amount for sure. What movement have we seen in the past couple of hours here after the close of last week's event?
Well, I'm comparing from like the weekend. I don't know but I just wanted to clarify. Either way, I'm just looking at guys whose odds have shortened because we've seen some golfers have their odds lengthened, but not really substantially. I think the golfers whose odds have shortened are more worthy of discussion here. Rory McIlroy did move from 20 to 18-1 on FanDuel Sportsbook. Tony Finau, Victor Hovland from 29 to 24. Love both of them this week. Patrick Reed, 30 to 28. Your boy, Shane Lowry, 39 to 37. Tyrrell Hatton, 46 to 42. Matt Fitzpatrick, 70 to 65. Our boy, Jason Kokrak, 80 to 70. Garrick Higo, 150 to 75. Whew. Charlie Hoffman, 150 to 80. And Gary Woodland, 110 to 90.
So you mentioned Rory shortening. We have not mentioned Rory barely yet. He had the win at the Wells Fargo, obviously. POA is not his best putting surface, and putting is not in general a strength for Rory. But the approach play, the past 3 events, 5.3, 4.3, 4.1 gained. He has the length to compete here. Are you totally off of Rory, or does the recent uptick push you back in?
I've seen enough to jump back on Rory. The question is, do I like him as much or more than other options? And I probably don't. I would have to think that he's not going to be one of the most. So we're going to have Jon Rahm in his own tier, basically. Mm-hmm. I don't think there's enough to say that Rory would kind of be significantly more popular than Spieth, Brooks, Bryson, DJ, JT. Xander's always popular. So I think Rory probably getting some leverage by being in on him. But again, process-wise, he's not my favorite, but game theory-wise, I'll probably end up with more Rory than I would have originally thought.
Yeah, if we're not talking about popularity, then it's hard to do Rory over them, because he's 100 less than DJ. He's 200 more than Xander, who we both like. That's tougher. But if you're looking for a guy who could realistically win it in that range, who might not be in a lot of rosters, Rory's potentially that guy there. Which lower salary golfers have odds stand out to you?
Not a lot, which is typical. And that's just kind of indicative of what we've been talking about with win equity falling off. But Phil, who you tried to, you know what? I'll take a Phil. Who was it? Phil versus
Lowry?
Shane Lowry. Yeah, let's do it for the sake of the show.
Okay.
Phil's 55-1 to win at 9,400.
Like I say, 55 years old. He's close, but not quite there yet. Got a couple years.
But really, anyone else below 9,500 doesn't really stand out necessarily. But golfers who are 9,000 or below, with the best win odds: Garrick Higo, 75-1, Charlie Hoffman, 80-1, Harris English, 95-1, and Max Homa, 110. I like, frankly, all of those guys.
So one thing we've overlooked is that it's the year of the old people. Given Phil, given Tom Brady, given Elio Castroneves at the Indy 500. So who is the person who is over 60-ish who is going to win this week? Is it Justin Rose week? Who are we overlooking here as a result of the old person narrative?
Oh boy, I haven't
even thought about the old person narrative yet.
I haven't been on the. This is news to me. No one sent me the newsletter in the mail.
You didn't get the narrative weekly? Narratives Now?
No.
Okay.
No, I only check I don't check my actual mail because.
You used a fake email account to sign up for it, didn't you? You wanted to make you feel good by signing up, but you didn't use a real email. I get it. Fine. Report back. For your Q&A show tomorrow, when we do the transition, we change services, so we might not do the transition, but if we do it, I'm going to ask you then who for Narrative Now is going to be the old to emerge this
week.
Lee
Westwood?
Sure. We'll go with that. Didn't he play here in 2008? I think.
Probably.
Wasn't he a veteran in 2008? I'm going to ask you about that tomorrow, so just prepare ahead of time for who will be the next old person to dominate. Weather for this week looks great right now. I'd love to be in San Diego personally, so you can get a heat check trip out there as opposed to, I don't know. We had a tornado warning at 1:15 in the morning last night, so I'd rather be in San Diego. Let's go there as opposed to wherever we're at right now. But weather's fine. Check back Wednesday, but it looks good for right now. So let's go into our tier-by-tier breakdown and outline our favorite golfers for this week based on the salaries at FanDuel.com. Brandon, who stands out to you in the upper tier for the U.S. Open?
Xander.
No analysis needed. We're done, right?
It's Xander at 11.4. It's a really good salary for him. Again, just trails Jon Rahm, just outperforms Dustin Johnson in my win simulations, which are based on past year of data, adjusted for field strength, adjusted for recency. So even with Xander's kind of dip a little bit recently, getting more weight, he's still the second best golfer in the field behind Jon Rahm. Great on POA, 90th percentile putting over the past 100 measured rounds when available. According to Fantasy National, really figured out Torrey Pines in January, played it, or possibly February. I haven't looked it up since the start of the show, but Played it in high school. Really good putter on POA, as I mentioned, but now apparently feeling even better with his putting because he feels like he's cheating, which I apparently need to try this now for myself because I cannot putt.
I don't think that can help me.
But he's made 14 of 16 career major cuts. He's finished top 10 in half of those 16 starts. And at US Opens, he has made all 4 cuts, finished top 10 4 times with 3 top 5s. Very good in US Opens. And his 95th percentile in adjusted strokes gained tee to green over the past year based on my database.
I'm very shook. I checked. The tournament ended on January 31st. So we could have been saying January this whole time. Had no idea.
I have been.
I haven't, because I've been working around it, saying earlier this year, over the winter. I've worked around it so many ways, unnecessarily.
Who knew that we could figure that out by looking it up?
Yeah, I checked 3 different sources because they all said January 31st, but I think it was ESPN says the date range. So figured it out. Thanks, ESPN. Xander's a great play. I would have had him as my player pick, but decided to go DJ since I hadn't talked about him yet. And it's only a $300 salary gap, and I kind of think that's worth it to get to DJ. He seemed to finally figure some things out over this past weekend, and it comes just in time for a POA event, and DJ always good on POA. At the Palmetto, DJ gained 3 off the tee and 2.4 in approach. The off the tee play has been there even when he's had this dip. The off the tee play has not been the concern. He's gained at least 2+ strokes in 4 straight, including just 2 rounds of the PGA before a missed cut there. The approach play has been more kind of around the board. He but it was good to see him do well last week. He also gained 1.9 around the green there. Even with the downtick, DJ is still 5th in distance, 7th in approach, 27th around the green, 9th in POA putting the past 50 rounds. So the long-term data says he should be able to do well here, and he's still coming in at a decent discount at $11,700. So DJ, a spotty history at Torrey Pines, has not played here since 2017, but like we saw with Xander, spotty history does not mean you can't do well at this event. So I'm going to bank the overall form here and rock a DJ at 11.7. I've not gotten your thoughts on DJ yet. So, it's one event, but he looked better. What are your thoughts on DJ this week?
I mean, I like DJ at the PGA. I like DJ last week. The thing to remember with golf is super recent samples are not that. If they were, you would just kind of look at the past 2 or 3 events and
past
golfers,
2 or 3 strokes,
basically. Yeah. Once we got access to more who finished well on Sunday, whose irons were good on Sunday, and that's doesn't mean anything that I've ever found. And so you look at DJ just over the past year, give or take. You can look at maybe 6 months at least, I would say. It was still really good, even if you weight it more toward recent rounds and use a longer sample. Still really good. Again, I have John Rahm at 5.8% likely to win, Xander at 5.7%, and DJ at 5.6%. Those are the only golfers above 4.5%. So no issues with DJ. And whenever he's playing his best golf, he is easily the best golfer in the world, I think. Yeah, which is not a hot take, but that's always important to keep in mind.
Yeah. An 11.7 doesn't encapsulate that, I don't think. So I think that DJ, a solid play this week. I want to have both him and Xander in a lot of lineups. And I'm not going to pick. I like both. We talked a lot about how well Xander played here back in January. There it is. And we talked about how he was tied for the lead in total strokes gained on the South Course. The guy he was tied with, we have not mentioned yet. That's Victor Hovland. He is your second player pick here in the upper range. What are you seeing with Hovland outside of the good outing here back in January?
Can I break the flow of the show real quick?
Yeah.
Just because if we don't talk about it now, we're not going to mention our thoughts on, our firm thoughts on Spieth, Brooks, Bryson.
Okay.
How would you rank those 3 from a FanDuel standpoint?
Spieth, Brooks, Bryson.
I could spin it any which way, and it would.
I should go Brooks, Spieth, Bryson. Keep in mind.
like Bryson, defending U.S. Open champ, we're kind of glossing over him. Brooks, always a threat at majors. So is Spieth again, I think, with what he's doing. So
is the Bryson stuff enough to motivate Brooks to like try extra hard?
I don't think he needs to try any harder in majors. I think he's already got that figured out.
Yeah, but he's like a psycho. And I feel like if anyone were to like find a new level, it might be him.
Yeah. I think I'm going to go Brooks, Bryson, Spieth.
Okay.
I just want, because we really glossed over those three names, and I think they're worth discussing. For Victor Hovland, I might start a lot of lineups, and this could be a chalky start with Xander and Hovland, but I like that. It leaves me a lot of salary to play with compared to some other stud lineups. But he's had some really good success at U.S. Opens. Was 12th, as the low amateur at Pebble Beach in 2019, 13th last September at Winged Foot. 96th percentile in adjusted strokes gained off the tee and approach. That's basically unmatched in this field. Runner-up at the Farmers in January. The around the green play, the putting, not quite as good as it could be for other golfers in this salary range, but he's kind of overcome that to figure out how to play U.S. Opens. And when you do adjust his numbers, 66th percentile over the past year around the green and 68th putting. So, not standing out, but also not even close to being like huge red flags.
And he's not dragging you down there. He's not erasing the gains he makes elsewhere, which is kind of a key, especially because he does gain a lot elsewhere. I've talked a lot about how much I like this tier. Hovland is a part of that for sure. So I think the Hovland, someone I will get to just as a result of being here a lot. But the main attraction for me is Tony Finau at 10-6. He's not a good POA putter, but he's been good at Torrey Pines South, which is a POA, obviously. So I think he fits a balanced build well at 10-6. He's played 21 rounds at Torrey Pines South specifically. He has gained an average of 1.9 strokes per round overall. And weirdly enough, 0.4 of that has come on the greens. He has gained at least 0.4 in all four strokes, key strokes gain categories. So although his overall POA putting is not good, he's been good here for some reason. The overall stats are electric, obviously. He ranks 21st in distance, 14th in approach, 4th around the green. He is the only golfer in the field in the top 25 in all three categories. Dustin Johnson close. He's 27th around the green, but Finau, top 25 in all three. Finau has finished 10th and 8th in the two majors so far this year, so he comes to play when he needs to. I think that 10-6 is a super fair salary if you're going for balance, which I would like to do here. So whether it's with Rahm as the top guy, Finau 2, or with like a Xander DJ as the top guy, Finau 2, I think that he sets up really, really well. Any final thoughts for you on Tony Finau?
Just really good in majors, has the right game for majors. Again, that can't win is probably not well-deserved. But I like Finau a lot. Would you give me a Hovland versus Finau head-to-head?
I guess.
Keeping in mind that I took on Phil for the sake of
the content. Sure.
Okay.
I like Hovland too, so it's not a shot at him. I like Finau more, so that's fine.
Okay. I mean, you're up 18-8 this year.
Don't talk about the bobble hats, though. We don't need to talk about that. We'll talk about the bets.
It's getting close.
I know, because I'm on fire, buddy. Let's move down to the mid-range here. The guys in the 9,000 range. Again, I like this range quite a bit. We talked before about how if you're not going to be long at the tee, you got to be stellar elsewhere to hang. Cam Smith kind of fits that mold. He's $9,800. What do you see with him here?
16 for 19 in career cuts made at majors. Just one top 25 and 5 starts at U.S. Opens, but
sorry, my ceiling fan is clipping the backdrop, and I can hear it, and it sounds like a bat, and I was very concerned for a second. If you're not watching a video, I was looking up and very afraid, but we're good. It's just
I didn't know. Yeah, I didn't know if like a ninja.
I thought it was a bat. I hate bats. Bats scare me so much. It's just my backdrop, though.
Hey man, bats are cool.
I don't want any harm for them. I just don't want them near me.
That's fair. Okay. Cam Smith, again, good in majors. Not specifically great at U.S. Opens, but he's gaining some distance in his career. Missed the cut at the Farmers in January, but I found that, again, based on 1 year of data, not to matter when the U.S. Open was at Torrey Pines back in 2008. Elite on POA, 88th percentile putting there over the past 100 rounds. A very nice approach game, 69th percentile there. Great wedge game, 93rd percentile. So, Cam Smith, not flawless, but we've seen him contend. We've seen him, he has the right kind of game to get out of trouble, which I think is going to start reflecting in his U.S. Open performance more than what we've seen from him in his career.
Do you want to add one more head-to-head of Cam Smith versus Paul Casey?
I go against Paul Casey a lot just because you love Paul Casey, so I'll do it.
Okay.
But, I'm cool with Casey as well.
Okay, so let's talk about Paul Casey. He is my top.
We've already had this bet, apparently.
Have we?
PGA.
Who won?
You.
Okay. Well, let's talk about why I'm going to win again. Paul Casey, he's been on a heater for a while, a hot second now, but keeps carrying salaries in the 9,000 range. I can't recall the last major I didn't talk about Paul Casey because he's always in the 9,000 range. He's always a value. But over the past 6 months, Casey ranks third in Data Golf's true strokes gained query. The only guys ahead of him are John Rahm and Jordan Spieth, who are both 12,000 or higher this week. In the big events recently, Casey has finished 5th at the Players, 25th at the Masters, 4th at the PGA. Since the PGA, his lone event was a 6th at the Porsche European Open. Why aren't there any Porsche events here? Anyway, Casey ranks 23rd in distance, 13th in approach. His short game, at least something to be desired, but he's overcoming that, and he's playing really well. So at $9,900, I think that, he's another reason why I want to be in this range quite a bit. So what are your thoughts on Paul Casey, even though you're betting Cam Smith against him?
Yeah, I mean, you can never really be fully against Paul Casey because he's so good tee to green. I have him the 89th percentile and adjusted and weighted strokes gained tee to green over the past year. The putting is always the problem. 26th percentile there, but kind of neutral on POA over his past 100 rounds, which is promising. Long off the tee, even though he doesn't have that kind of, you don't really think of Paul Casey as being long, but 80 percentile there. It should be good at avoiding bogeys. 92nd percentile over the past 100 rounds. So nothing against him, just kind of in a little bit more on Cam Smith.
I'm pretty sure I can hear hail bouncing off my car right now, so I'm going to go shut my window, and you tell me why you like Adam Scott at $9,300.
Will do. So Adam Scott was 10th at the Farmers this year. Jim already talked in detail about Scott at Torrey Pines, runner-up in 2019 as well. Has one positive putting surface to his name, and that is POA, which is good for this week. And he rates in the 79th percentile when putting on POA over the past 100 rounds. I already mentioned he's not accurate, but he is long, and that's enough to sort of overcome, the test here. Kind of what we saw from Bryson at the U.S. Open is if you're going to be in the rough, might as well just be as far down the fairway as you can be because you're going to have an advantage. If you were short and inaccurate off the tee, you're not going to contend here. So don't look at fairways gained so much. That's not a bad thing if you are at least somewhat long, but if you're short and inaccurate, just cross those guys off, I think, this week. And Adam Scott, just a really good golfer when he plays, really long history of playing in majors. So I think Adam Scott's in the conversation for a cash game.
Update on the hail. It's not hail. It's rain hitting the air conditioner, which I can't take out because I refuse. So you're going to have to deal with it because it's on the other side of the house.
I can't hear it. You're going to have to deal with it.
Oh, you can't hear it?
I don't think so.
How? Okay, anyway, whatever. My mic's great, apparently. Anyway, I think Scott's very good. I would have him I think I have him number 3 in this tier. I go Kokrak, Burns, Scott as my ranking. How do you rank those 3?
I think we did this last major, and we're going to regret. I think it was Neiman over Scott.
Is that the one where Burns withdrew, or is that?
I think. Again, don't ask me these questions, man. I don't remember if Sam Burns withdrew from the PGA, and I should, but I can't.
Withdrew from some event, and it hurt.
I cannot keep all these events straight. But,
physically in pain when he withdrew. I'm sure he was too, but
I'll go Kokrak, Scott, Burns.
Okay. Fair enough. Let's talk about Kokrak here. We talked about Kokrak. Let's talk about Sam Burns. I like him. I like Kokrak, number one. Sam Burns is my number two in this range. He is $9,200. He has the distance we need. He ranks 33rd in distance the past 50 rounds, 12th in approach, and he's also, it's a small sample for Sam Burns on POA, but he's a good putter overall. Ranks 34th on POA in his sample. That all adds up really well. The reason I go Kokrak over him, which may be stupid because Kokrak is also bad around the green, but like Burns is bad around the green. He ranks 124th there the past 50 rounds. So that's enough for me to go Kokrak over Burns, and it does lower my planned out exposure to Burns. But I think that there's still enough elsewhere for me to feel good about him. So that's why I go Kokrak, Burns, Scott, but I will be pretty heavy on all three, if I'm being honest. Do you have any additional thoughts on anyone in this tier?
Not specifically. I love Burns, like just long off the tee, and that should give him a huge advantage. So probably going to hone in on those guys specifically, honestly.
I think that it'll be like fairly concentrated exposure between those three to give myself an advantage if they do well. I know that's very risky because like they all have holes, but like that's okay. I'm fine with that this week. Let's move down to the value range. Again, we're trying to avoid values in general, but I think the guys we have talking up are all guys I'm comfortable using, including your recommendations. Ryan Palmer, almost a pick on my behalf. He's instead a pick on your behalf. What do you see with Palmer here at $8,800?
Yeah, and you know, we can concentrate on the values and rotate in the studs if we want. That's an option for this week. I heard something just now. I don't know.
It was a bark. It was not me barking, by the way. There's so many sounds going on.
Oh, boy. Ryan Palmer, $8,800, so pretty good salary there. Runner-up at Torrey Pines in January. And there's always kind of some overlap whenever we like Jon Rahm, which is always, but whenever it's really a good setup for Jon Rahm, it should be kind of a good setup for Ryan Palmer. Palmer's finished 2nd, 13th, 21st, second at the Farmers over the past 4 years. And he's long off the tee.
Yeah, he's good. I think that Palmer is really fun, $8,800. The reason that I didn't get to him over the other guys was the short game concerns, but that's not enough to push me off completely because, again, he did do well here despite that earlier this year. But I still will have him for sure. My favorite guy down here is Charlie Hoffman, right at $9,000. He ranks 18th in Data Golf's true strokes gained over the past 6 months, right between Patrick Reed and Tony Finau. 39th in salary is Hoffman, so it seems like he's a bit under salary this week. He ranks 17th in distance and second in approach the past 50 rounds. He's also decent on POA. He ranks 44th there. He did withdraw this year at Torrey Pines, but he was 9th the year before that, has another top 10 previously in his ledger at the Farmers. Hoffman's pretty similar to Kokrak, where he does struggle around the green, but I think he's doing enough right now to overcome that. So I'm good continuing to ride Hoffman here at $9,000. Brandon, where do you sit on Charlie Hoffman for this week?
He could be the old guy, right? 44.
Yeah. That's old enough.
Yeah. You said 60, but then you mentioned Justin Rose, so
I mean,
I don't think he's quite 60 yet, but
Justin Rose is 40. Wow, I would have taken the over on that, but okay.
Yeah, I mean, Alec Hoffman, he's someone who I featured in my write-up on numberFire. Really good iron play lately. And also long off the tee. Like another one of those golfers where you don't really think about it, but 84th percentile in distance. So I'm good with Hoffman. I think he's one of the best plays at or below 9,000.
Okay, who else do you like down here on FanDuel for this week?
I can throw out some other names at the end of this, but I'm going to stick with Garrick Higo. I don't think he's going to surpass 30% popularity. If I'm wrong, I will update my opinions by closer to Thursday, but
they're going to say like after lock.
Well, yeah, I will
update my opinions after lock. I think he'll be under 30% when he checks in at 25. Yeah, sure.
Well,
sure, buddy.
At that point, it's not an opinion if there's fact, but
I don't know. I'm not going to police you there.
So Higo, we saw life with the irons last week. Not that we've never seen it, but really good to see from him with that good tee to green play and really long off the tee. I've already mentioned this, but that's something to keep in mind. I think that's vital this week. and Higo has that despite being a really good putter. And there's not a lot of overlap between really good putters and really long drivers. So whenever you have that, that's not the worst start for a major setup, especially at a U.S. Open.
So Ryan Palmer is to John Rahm as Garrett Higo is to Bryson DeChambeau, is what you're saying?
I mean, maybe.
My second guy is Max Homa, because like you talk about the West Coast swing for Max Homa all the time. We're back on the West Coast, baby, and part of it was Torrey Pines. He played well at Torrey Pines previously. He's been here 9 total rounds. He's at 0.7 strokes gained per round, including 0.4 on approach. If you look at just the past 2 years, it's 1.6 per round. He's finished 9th and 18th in those 2 events. Homa, couple slots ahead of Kokrak and Data Golf's true strokes gained query over the past 6 months. And it makes sense, too, because he has a win and 3 top 10s in that time. Homa has struggled in the big events, and that is what solidifies Hoffman ahead of him for me. He missed the cut, the Players, the Masters, and the PGA, but good POA putter. His data is solid overall, so I'm okay with Homa. The one guy I wanted to ask you about is Bubba Watson. The data, like very recently, is not good, but tends to do well at Torrey Pines, fits the bomber angle, has had good approach play in the not terribly distant past. So thoughts on Homa, thoughts on Bubba, and then anyone else who is on your radar for this week.
All right. Thoughts on Homa. Love him. Always like him on the West Coast. Still kicking myself for not being in on him for his win. One of my favorite plays down here, but like you said, there are some concerns. One made cut in 7 tries at majors, but still someone that I'm going to be heavy on this week. Bubba did win at the Farmers once before. Super recent form. Something I try to overlook, like I've talked about. 82nd percentile. Then over the past year, when you wait for field strength and recency in adjusted tee to green in my database, we know he's long off the tee. He's kind of a baseline putter on POA, so that's enough. I'm definitely not out on Bubba, but I'm not going to make him a priority play. And then who else I like down here? Carlos Ortiz is 8,500. Harris English not long off the tee, as long as he can overcome that 18th hole from this past week, which was quite a train wreck. Looked like me playing a hole out there, going bunker to bunker, and really struggling. But Carlos Ortiz, Harris English, I think, is in play. Lonto Griffin is 8,000. He's as low as I'm going to go, and I'm going to kind of cap that a bit. Matt Wallace, so I'm going to consider 86. So we have names here.
Too. Yeah.
It's a matter of, I think you have to figure out, are you going to sort of solidify your studs and narrow it down to like 4 or 5 and then just try to mix and match the right value plays? Or are you going to say, I'm taking a stand on, these, 4 to 6 value plays pushing for a top 25, but I don't know who's going to win because it's so tight at the top. And I'm going to play as many of the, like mix and match as many of the studs as I can. I think both are viable. I'm much more likely just to lock in the studs and rotate in the values based on probability, but I think the inverse is definitely possible this week with what the values looking like.
And I think that for me specifically, the quote unquote values I'd be building around would be the guys in the low 9,000 range. Kokrak, Scott, Burns, all those guys grade out well enough where I would at least give that some consideration. Let's finish up here with our picks to win for this week based on the odds over at FanDuel Sportsbook. We each get one pick. I know one of mine. It'll be Dustin Johnson at 15-1.
We get 2 picks.
What did I say?
We each get 1 pick.
Oh, we each get 2 picks. Okay, so one of mine will be DJ. Do you want to go with yours?
Yeah, it should be Xander, but I'm going to go with Brooks.
Okay.
At 18-1.
Okay.
And then do you want me to? It's
I'm
probably
still looking. So
okay, probably a coin flip between Patrick Reed and Victor Hovland, but my heart's saying Victor Hovland. My head is saying Patrick Reed. I'll go. Give me Hovland. No,
okay.
Wait. He's not 24, huh?
Yeah.
And what's Reed? 28. I'm going to go with Hovland. I'm going to stick with it.
So you have Hovland and Brooks, correct?
Yeah.
I'm going to go DJ and so I feel like this is the dilemma I'm having is that I think Paul Casey's odds are longer than they should be. However, I think realistically the odds he wins are not that high. So the odds that he beats out all of these guys are not that high. So I think that you should bet Casey for like a top 10, stuff like that. That's not what we're talking about here, though. So I'm actually going to go. I'm going to go Jordan Spieth at 21-1. Like we talked about before, he's not long off the tee, but he's not a negative. And everything else is so good for him right now that I think he can get the job done. So I'm going to go DJ at 15-1, Spieth at 21-1. I think this is an event where it seems like we both took the approach of it's going to be a stud. We just have to decide which one. So long shots not super on the table for us for this week. Any final thoughts for you, Brandon, before we close up shop for the U.S. Open?
I think this is one of our longest podcasts probably ever for a PGA show. There's a lot to talk about with a field this good.
So it's definitely been long. It's for sure.
But I think we covered everything.
Yeah.
Really just kind of figure out if you want to lock in the studs or the values.
And I think you could do either. So check back on sentiment if you have FanShare access. Check back on that Wednesday to see who's buzzing. And again, the default assumption should be that no one will be restrictively popular, but we could get rebuttals to that by the time we get to Wednesday night. That is all that we have here for today for the U.S. Open. But do not forget, we are back once again Tuesday, 3:30. Brandon will be breaking down your thoughts, taking your questions live on air, talking about betting and DFS for the U.S. Open on the FanDuel YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter pages. So make sure you subscribe there, but also make sure you're subscribed to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, leave us a rating and review as well. Brandon, if people have questions for you before Tuesday, where can they find you on Twitter?
I'm at Gdula13, GDULA13.
And I am at Jim Sannes, JIMSANNES. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcast. Big thank you to Calvin Theobald, our video producer, for setting up the video broadcast for today. Thank you, Cal, as always. And thank you to everyone for tuning in. Good luck to you with your DFS lineups for the U.S. Open. We'll talk to you once again next week. This has been the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast, powered by numberFire.